Hört. Festivals mit Ö1. Heute die Ars Electronica 2024.
Welcome to the Ö1 Festival podcast on the Ars Electronica 2024. Europe's largest festival for art, technology and society is heading into the home straight, and so is our series of talks. Welcome to the 8th and final episode. Until Sunday, September 8th, artists, researchers, entrepreneurs, activists and interested members of the public from all over the world will be coming together in Linz. Over the past few weeks, we've introduced you to selected highlights of the diverse program and the people behind it. You can find all the information and details about what is taking place, when and where, as well as answers to frequently asked questions online at ars.electronica.art. Today, following on from Agnes Eisleitner-Kisule in episode 7, we'd like to introduce you to another participant and expert at the 3-day symposium on the festival theme Hope, Who Will Turn the Tide. From September 5th to 7th, the theme symposium serves as a platform to explore innovative solutions to social challenges such as the climate crisis, the energy transition, and the impact of artificial intelligence. At the Pre-Ars Electronica Forum on September 7th, one of the speakers is Micaela Mantegna from Argentina. She's a lawyer, video game enthusiast, and international expert on digital ethics, extended reality policy, and the intersection of AI, creativity, and copyright. She's currently an affiliate at the Berkman Klein Center for Internet and Society at Harvard University, where her research interests include the governance of the Metaverse. The Metaverse is the term used to describe a comprehensive, immersive digital world in which physical, virtual and augmented reality merge and in which people can interact in a variety of ways. My colleague Hannah Balber met Micaela Mantegna for an interview via video conference.
I'm very pleased to welcome Micaela Mantegna from Argentina, a lawyer and activist specialized in video games policy, extended reality, and artificial intelligence ethics. Micaela, you describe yourself as an abo gamer. What is that exactly?
Hi, Hannah. Thank you for having me in the podcast, and hi to your audience. I'm super happy to be here and to be in Ars Electronica this year. Abo Gamer was something that I created to explain to my parents what I do, because by definition in Spanish, abogado or abogada means lawyer, female or male lawyer, and gamer. So when I started crossing my expertise as a lawyer with video games, I started joking like I'm a video game lawyer, so there you go, an abo gamer. But it kind of explains these conversions because I do research on AI and video games and ethics and the metaverse on all these technologies conversion. And I have my background as a lawyer is on copyright and intellectual property. So all of the things coming together, and therefore I try to explain myself as an abo gamer.
How did your passion for gaming begin, and what fascinates you about the world of video games?
You know, I'm originally from Patagonia in the south of Argentina, very, very south. So long days, very windy, small town. So I discovered gaming when I was 6, 7 years of age. And I was fascinated that the things were moving on the screen. So we were always with my brother, inventing stories about the video games we were watching. So I really grew up playing and thinking about games. But it was not until late that I kind of connect the dots that I could do that professionally, and particularly thinking about research, because one of my concerns is about how video games can impact the world. When you were presenting me, you were talking about also, as I'm an activist, I come from internet governance spaces, talking about digital freedoms and digital rights. And it was fantastic to see how communities in video games were also carrying these banners. During the pandemic, you can see how people continue to gather in virtual worlds. But before that, people was already organizing and making social connections and making political presentations. So there are really interesting intersections about how we live and act through video games.
What inspired you to combine video games and law? Was there a pivotal moment or experience?
I was very curious, and this is more on the personal side, when you are kind of like disappointed of your profession. And this is what I did not sign up for this when it comes to law. And I was always looking for the creative aspects of the law, both in my practice and research, trying to think like the frontier questions, how the law was connecting with technology. And I remember I was reading that led me up to intellectual property, because intellectual property, and particularly copyright, deals with culture, with creativity. And I remember I was reading something about Harry Potter. I used to have a podcast as well, and I was doing research about copyright and Harry Potter. And that's how kind of like, wait a minute, we can connect these two things, connect with the concerns I had about culture, about creativity, and about law.
You coined the term Abo-Gamer to kind of also explain to your parents or maybe friends or somebody else what it is that you're doing. How did people react when you said, I'm going to focus on video games? Were there also maybe some prejudices or misconceptions that people have or had about video games and gaming?
Absolutely, absolutely. There is a lot of, I think, prejudice against gaming, and for many years it was considered something childish, something that only kind of like kids do or teenagers. There are these misconceptions around gaming, that gaming is just losing your time, which is kind of like ignoring that video games are a way to tell stories. And the thing with video games is like you can rehearse and you can practice empathy when you are playing, because you can put the player in particular situations that allows you to think differently and to walk in other people's shoes. So for me, there is so much more to see about gaming. There is so many stories that you have to look. And I always joke that everyone is a gamer. They just don't know about it, because you can find eventually a game that could interest to that person, because gaming is just a way to tell that kind of stories. So for me, it's like also interesting seeing these barriers that are starting to merge and blur with other artistic expressions. How kind of like you create immersive experience. So I could be here like all day talking about and recommending games. So I will stop here.
How do you connect gaming, AI, and law in your daily work?
And my daily research, yeah. Yeah, there is so much to talk about that, because people kind of like realize that AI is something new, that the metaverse is something new, but this has been around for many times. What maybe we are seeing now is like consumer facing, like generative AI taking that much space in the mind of people. But for example, when I was researching for my book, I wrote a book on creativity and AI and copyright. I had a chapter, of course, on video games and AI. And part of the chapter was showing how AI has been used in video games to generate characters, to do procedural generation, so that is not something new. And on the AI ethics side, I also, and this is a funny story, but I started doing research on AI ethics because of a video game. I loved a space game that was called Mass Effect. And one of the character was an android, and that character was asking that, of course, a robot, if that unit had a soul, which for me was a very deep philosophical question. So that kind of playing that game kind of like sparked my interest in AI ethics. So yeah, there is more that you can meet the eye when it comes to video games and AI.
With her expertise as a video game scholar and activist, Micaela Mantegna is at the forefront of shaping digital realities. She's a sought-after speaker at global conferences and a member of international forums on AI and metaverse policy, including the World Economic Forum and the London-based think tank Chatham House. In 2022, she was named a TED Fellow, an acknowledgement for people doing innovative work around the world. The non-profit organisation TED is dedicated to the spread of great ideas, often in the form of short, powerful presentations called TED Talks. Micaela Mantegna's TED Talk on the future of the metaverse has been viewed more than 1.5 million times. Mantegna is currently an academic at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard, doing research on video game policy, ethics, and immersive technologies for extended reality. XR is a collective term for technologies such as virtual reality and augmented reality, which combine virtual environments with our real world. Her book, Artificial Creativity, Artificial Intelligence and Copyright, published in 2022, examines the intricate relations between AI, art, ethics and copyright law, and has already addressed many of the current questions and problems posed by the rise of generative AI. At the Ars Electronica Festival 2024, Micaela Mantegna appears at the Theme Symposium on Saturday, September 7th. On this day, artists, researchers, technologists, and activists will talk about their experiences and views on the use of AI in the artistic creative process. As an expert, Mantegna takes part in an interactive discussion entitled Building the Future of AI in Arts. It's about the infrastructures and frameworks needed for the artistic ecosystem to fully embrace the creative potential of AI technology.
And with AI, this is something I have been warning people for many, many years, not just in terms of ethics, but particularly to artists when I was doing research on generative AI, talking like, what is the next step for this? I started doing my research in, I think it's 2017, 2018, started writing the book and published it in 2022. In fact, I had to delay publishing the book because generative AI exploded. And for me, it was like, okay, I know this is a game changer. So I kind of had to rewrite the book, some parts to add all the content that was coming live in real time. And this, I remember at some point that we were debating if AI could kind of like draw hands. And everything with AI is a matter of time. And I remember debating the question about what creativity is and if machines can be creative. And a lot of people coming from the arts was like, no, machines can never be creative and can never create something that is appealing or aesthetically interesting. And fast forward to these days, we are seeing the havoc and the wreaking havoc that is creating AI in creative markets and labor. So all of the things connects to the ethics of how we deploy and how we create this technology and who reaps the benefits of the wealth that is being created by this technology.
Why is it so important to discuss infrastructures and legal frameworks to ensure the ethical and fair use of AI in the arts?
That's a fantastic question. I think that the problem comes from that a framework in terms of copyright has been adapting, kind of like trying to fit the mold, but not completely rethinking copyright to adapt to new technologies. And for me, it goes back to this thing about scarcity and abundance, because today we are seeing a very different reality where everyone is a creator. There is abundance of content online. There are also different ways of consume culture. It's interesting because if you go back to how culture was transmitted, like oral tradition, like people was creating something, but there was no assignment of intellectual property rights on that. So it's like a commercial aspect that, of course, it works well from certain industries, but also creates a lot of unfair situations for artists and for people that cannot share culture. There are kind of like ridiculous examples about artists that are being barred from their own work because of copyright. And well, Taylor Swift had to record their albums. I think she's a prime example of how bad contracts and copyright can put a framework in culture. There is also the question about orphan works. We have long terms of protection, 50, 70, or 100 years. That's in terms of how our culture is moving, is a lot of time. And it's also for me, there is a movement that's called the negative spaces of intellectual property that challenges these philosophical rationales of like artists need to be paid to create, because if you don't pay an artist, the artist is not going to create. I think these are two different questions. And if you think that economics is your only motivation to create, I think you're losing a big part of the question. Is of course everyone needs access to a means of sustenance, but I think it's kind of like missing the point in terms of why as human creates. But also is thinking about how our culture and society develops in these digital environments, that we're seeing why people share their content for free on Twitch, on streaming, or on podcast platforms, because we are starting to see different business models that are more basically based on how You can spread your content around the internet more than lock it down and you have to pay to access this. So I think there is a lot of changes that are not being taken into consideration. And for me, the fundamental problem is about when it comes to AI, I feel like artists are being used with this narrative to fight against AI instead of taking advantage of these capabilities. But I think at the bottom of this question is a question about wealth redistribution. Who is appropriating the wealth that AI systems are creating? And why this is not being shared with the artist? Because at least, and I can recommend this to read further if you're interested, I wrote a very extensive essay for the Yale Law Review that's called Why Copyright is Not the Solution to Generative AI, and explaining that even if we extend the copyright framework to cover some of the problems of AI, artists are not probably going to see the money because we already have creative industries where artists are being treated unfairly and poorly, and the rights are not being respected. So for me, that is something that needs to change.
You already mentioned your book about creativity, AI, and copyright. Right now, you're working or finishing an upcoming book, a new book about cognitive surveillance in the metaverse. Could you give me a glimpse into the main themes and ideas of your upcoming book?
Sure. I love to talk about the metaverse as conversions of technology, conversions of public and private interest, conversions of digital and physical and virtual and tangible realities. And the thing with this is, where are we going? And this is coming from my internet governance background, because internet was created in the 50s as a way to kind of like share knowledge and open and decentralized. And we end up with this model today, which is based on surveillance, which is kind of like dominated by a few entities and players that has a lot of power and are in fact intervening and interfering in our democracies. So the thing is, if we are thinking about the metaverse as these conversions of technology, where you have AR and VR coming into play, and even furthermore, and that's why it's called brain dancing in the metaverse, because brain dances is a cyberpunk reference. They have like these devices that you put in your brain, and you can record your activity, but also see the brain activity of other person. And not many people are thinking about this, but we are heading into neurotechnology becoming more commercially available. So if you mix the elements of current surveillance capitalism and the business models that we have in current internet, and how big data and big tech are kind of like taking advantage of our data to produce surveillance machines, and we add to the mix AR, generative AI, and neurotechnology, we could end up in this cognitive surveillance capitalism, which is like the worst version of the metaverse.
Why is the metaverse such an important topic in your research? So, what fascinates you about it?
I love the metaverse because I started thinking about, and this connects, of course, with video games, but with virtual worlds. I used to live in Patagonia. I'm 44 years old, so I know what was before the internet and after the internet, and how you can find friends, people, like-minded people through the internet. So I think I could see all these very beautiful aspects of connectivity, but also through my practice and research, all the things that can go wrong. And for me, the metaverse is like this next step. It's not thinking about Meta's concept of the metaverse. We need to kind of like ditch that and think about how the metaverse is an overlay of information into our physical reality. We already are kind of like seeing these glimpses when you are navigating a city using your phone and eventually using AR and these augmented reality devices that are going to overimpose information on this. So for me, that's where we are going. And what I want to avoid is becoming like the worst sequel of the current internet. Like, we haven't yet solved all the problems in terms of internet governance, in terms of toxicity, bias, inequality, and we're still moving further ahead in terms of creating an even more digitally immersed society. So how do we stop that? And for me, going back again, it has to start with thinking about different business models for these future metaverses.
The festival, the Ars Electronica Festival 2024, is dedicated to the theme and to the title Hope, who will turn the tide. I was wondering what brings you hope?
That's a great question. I love that. And that's kind of like my activist side. I'm always hopeful. And I love classic science fiction. I love Star Trek. And a lot of the ethics of my work has been inspired by the eth of Star Trek, of thinking a society that can benefit humankind and society at large. So for me, hope would be seeing in the future that we can change the rationales of capitalism that has taken to this point of extreme inequality, and change the course and be more responsible to the environment in terms of sustainability, because these technologies have a huge impact in terms of water consumption and electricity. So for me, hope is that I see that this is something that eventually will happen, maybe seeing a post-scarcity society, a society where our needs are covered, and taking the best aspects of AI for benefiting everyone. That's my hope.
That was Micaela Mantegna in the Ö1 Festival Guide to Ars Electronica 2024. Thank you very much for listening. This was our last interview in this series. The festival in Linz comes to an end on Sunday, September the 8th, so feel free to take another opportunity to explore the projects of our podcast guests on site. All episodes will remain available online. I would like to say goodbye to you now. Take care, and until next time.